Okay, welcome to the topic for this month. We are going to talk about communication, and this is such an important topic.
Definitely important.
If you are having communication problems, you are having marriage problems. So what better way to set yourself up for success than to start learning about really effective communication?
This really is like the foundational skill for everything else, right? If you know how to communicate, you can get through anything.
It's so true.
Yeah.
So we want you to get out your SYMBIS report. And if you look on, it's probably going to be page 12. There are 3 sections. The first one kind of describes each spouse and your kind of personality. The second section, it says, how would you like your spouse to communicate with you? Now, this...
I'd like her to communicate with me.
Yes, we all want to communicate. So this, again, the SYMBIS report gives you a baseline. It tells you where you are when you took this report.
It says page 8 on here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Twelve.
That's my mistake. It is on page 12.
Okay.
So I wrote that wrong.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Thanks for communicating that.
No problem.
So good. So we want to highlight this middle section when you're saying, I'd like for you to communicate this way, with me this way. This is your initial thoughts without having learned any of these concepts. And so I really want to also highlight that these are potential traps. Because what this means is, hey, I told you I want you to communicate with me this way, so now I expect you to do it.
Well, that means that all the other topics that we've talked about, that doesn't mean they go out the window. Still remember, like we've talked about blame a lot, we've talked about expectations. So remember all the things that we've taught. And if this is the first marriage enhancement course that you've listened to, go back and listen to the other ones when you have time, because it'll give you some context.
Yes. So it's really good because you will gain a lot of self-awareness if you read through your own and say, this could be a potential trap that I'm in when my husband communicates in his own way. And then the last part, communication skills you'd like to improve. This is self-improvement. The purpose of SYMBIS is not for you to take this information and then point the finger at your spouse and say, you're supposed to do all the things here. We all have our own pace. We all have our own way of trying to approach these things and improve. And sometimes we need to give each other a lot of compassion and leeway.
I'll say this, everything that we talk about can be done just by you improving. And when we talk about the improvement that comes with thought work and through the self-coaching model, it really doesn't require your spouse to improve with you. If you improve yourself and you improve your skills, your spouse is going to improve too.
Yeah.
It'll happen. But if you're like, oh, how come you're not working on this as hard as me? That could definitely put you in that trap that Shelly's talking about. So focus on yourself and help each other and be compassionate and empathetic. But your responsibility is your own.
So true. Okay, and then the final thing before we jump into all of the good stuff that's coming is we just want to reference this book. It's called Messages, and we're going to take some concepts from here. It's one of the best books that we've read about communication. It's clear, it's simple, it doesn't overcomplicate things. And so we're going to take some of the concepts from there. Okay, let's dive into it.
I'm going to go through the definitions of communication. Again, we go through definitions a lot through this course and other courses of ours because it's so easy to just get stuck on one definition and think, okay, well, I know what communication is. It's this. Now, would you be able to say all of these definitions if someone asked you what communication was? Probably not. So let's go through all the definitions, and it gives us perspective when we think about different ways to use words. Words make a big difference, and so it's important to understand them. So I'm just going to go through these. So to communicate, to share information, right? That's an obvious one. Not only your information, but thoughts, news, ideas, knowledge, feelings, sharing whatever it is, doesn't matter. To exchange information between individuals.
Ooh.
Okay, that's the next level of communication, right? Because I can just sit and talk and say I'm communicating, but am I really communicating? It takes 2 to tango. I like that one. That's like one of my favorite cliches that I use.
I know.
To make known. This is something that we're going to get into a little bit more. But to make known, there's a lot of things that we can make known to somebody else. And that's super important to be able to do that. To reveal, I can think of a lot of times when I've revealed something that's been on my mind or something that I'm struggling with. Shelly, I need to talk to you about something. And it might not be something that's obvious. I reveal it to her so that I can get some help.
Yes.
Right? Or else I can get a response or whatever it is I'm looking for. But hopefully the reason why we communicate is because we're either helping or being helped. That's actually a good way to think about communication. Is it's got to be a symbiotic relationship, right? I don't have a wife just to listen to me rant about stuff. And she doesn't do that to me. I want to listen, and we're going to get into that. So also it means to transmit information so that it is satisfactorily received and understood. Yes. That's super important.
It's very important.
And that's not just your choice, right? So transmitting information to somebody doesn't mean that it's going to be satisfactorily received and understood.
Correct.
Again, back to my favorite cliche, it takes two to tango.
Yes.
So communication really requires listening skills. And so if you want to be heard, you need to hear.
Yes.
If you want to teach or share, you need to be willing to listen and learn as well. And if you're willing to do that, then the other person most likely is going to be able to do the same for you and want to do that.
Yes.
And then also a process by which information is exchanged using symbols, signs, verbal, written gestures, or behaviors. So obviously this isn't just words. You can communicate in all different ways. And finally, expressing information effectively. Tone of voice, the intention you have, the spirit in which you're sharing it, the attitude that you have, all of these things go into it.
Yes. I just wanted to point out one definition that I really love, and this is not an obvious connection, but since part of our coaching business is to help couples with the ever-challenging topic of intimacy, I wanted to point out that one definition on this list, this one right here, to make known, is also one of the key definitions of the word intimacy. Mm-hmm. So you can see that communication is so vital.
It's part of intimacy.
And effective communication is part of intimacy. So if you ever struggle with intimacy, I bet communication is probably part of it as well.
And if you haven't figured out by now, we focus a lot on emotional intimacy and connection, not just the physical. The physical is one little part of the large spectrum of intimacy. And so the emotional intimacy really is even more important than the physical.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to talk about 3 competent communication components. And so for the next few minutes, these are the 3 things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about listening correctly. There's a right way to listen and a wrong way to listen, and we're going to talk about the correct way to listen. The second one is expressing ourselves effectively. We can say a lot of crap and it might not be effective at all. So we're going to talk about this.
Especially if it's crap.
Yes. And finally, understanding intentionality. And that means that when you're really trying to communicate, you understand the other person's intended message, not your own interpretation of it. So these are kind of the main 3 things we're going to talk about and give you some guidelines on.
Okay, when we talk about listening and the right way to do it, there is a right way and there is a wrong way. So we're going to focus on real listening, okay? Not fake, obviously, but real listening takes intention. You have to have the desire and you have to actually choose to do this correctly. Just hearing words, and even if you can repeat back the words, that is not the full definition of real listening. So let's run through the 4 goals of real listening, okay? So understanding someone, just hearing what they have to say, yeah, I can repeat it back, but to really understand them means that you got to dig deep into your empathy. You have to dig deep into your emotions and try to read their emotions too, not just their words, but hear what they're saying, watch their body language, look at how they're speaking with you, and really try to understand where they're coming from. We say, well, you can walk in someone else's shoes to understand them, or you can't really understand someone until you walk in their shoes. Well, the way we walk in people's shoes is by really trying to emotionally connect with them and try to put ourselves in their shoes emotionally. Okay, and also not just emotionally, but also intellectually. Try to understand that. The second one is enjoying somebody. I've always loved this teaching, and one of my mentors taught me this. But when you go down this path of trying to understand people and actually growing with other people, the first thing that you really should do is try to see the goodness in that person. See them for who they are and the things that they can bring to your life. Enjoy them. Be curious about them. They're a different spirit than you. They've had all kinds of different experiences. Their perspective is different than yours, even your spouse, right? You might have more and more of the same perspective as you go on through life, but you're never going to have exactly the same perspective. And that's awesome. That is so good. Number 3, learn something from someone. Okay, so I said earlier, if you really want to share and teach somebody or share with them for the purpose of them understanding, you have to first be willing to listen and learn from them. It's so important. And if you have this kind of relationship where they know that you will listen to them when they're speaking to you and sharing with you, then they're going to be so much more likely to listen to you when you want to share something. And then finally, to help or serve somebody. Again, if you're communicating and you're really communicating and you're really connected with somebody, you're either seeking help or helping. And I say that in a general sense, right? You might not always be doing that, but like even when you're just having a conversation about the weather or about how good this meal is or whatever, like that camaraderie and that communication is super important. So you are serving each other when you have good conversation, even if it's not about deep subjects. So you can do this even with the lightest subject that there is, even when it's not something that's super important. And then we just want to make a note, it's 100% of our own responsibility to have one of these goals in mind when we are listening to somebody. If we know these 4 goals and we're thinking about them while we're listening, we're going to accomplish it, because the times that we're unsuccessful, usually it's when we're like, all right, whatever, just get it off your chest. Here, I'm listening. Okay, whatever, let's fix it now. I mean, that's what a lot of men do. Like, well, let's fix it. Well, that's not always the right thing to do right then. Eventually, hopefully, you can help them fix it, but sometimes you can't be the one that fixes it. And you just need to listen so that you can have a conversation. And during that conversation, your spouse or whoever it may be will probably come up with a solution. And so that way, you really will help to accomplish it. It's a wonderful thing.
Yes. Okay. I love these 4 goals. And I think if we never learn this, we don't realize that that's on us to go into the conversations with our spouse with one of these 4 goals in mind. When we do that, conversations that we normally think are boring are going to be exciting, because we will be developing and growing and evolving as a person. And that usually fills our soul with some awesome emotions.
Well, in our last podcast, Shelley talked a lot about how communication and listening, it really is the ultimate aphrodisiac.
Yes.
Look, that's not the point of this, but it is one of the effects. Because I'll tell you, when we're having a good conversation, and I know that she really cares about what I'm saying, and she really wants to help, and she really wants to understand me, oh my gosh, I feel totally loved.
Yeah.
But the times when I don't think she's really interested, and it probably happens more on my side, when she's talking to me, I know that when I'm choosing to listen the right way, I know how she responds. She loves it, and she loves me a lot more than when I'm not. And I like to be loved.
Yes.
I do. It's one of the things that I love about being married, is feeling like my spouse appreciates me and loves me. And this is like the best way to do this.
Yes.
So, but then after that, you might get lucky, right?
Maybe. Okay, so we wanted to make this really simple for you. So we have this total listening checklist. And these are just things you can go through and self-observe. Ask yourself, am I doing these things? Am I a good listener? Okay, so let's just go through them. Do you maintain good eye contact, right? If you're looking down at your phone the whole time, you are probably not being a good listener, because you have a distracted mind at that point, and you're sending very mixed messages to your spouse. So make sure you maintain good eye contact. It doesn't have to be scary and creepy, but good eye contact. Number 2, lean slightly forward. This keeps you engaged.
And from falling asleep.
Yes.
Or drifting off or daydreaming.
Yes. Most of our conversations, we're up, we're active. Every now and then you might be lying down or something like that, but the majority we're upright. So make sure you're kind of leaning in like, hey, I'm here, I'm present, I'm paying attention.
It's good for both of you.
Yes. Number 3, reinforce the speaker by nodding and by paraphrasing. Okay, so if you're just listening to them and your eyes are closed and you're never giving feedback verbally, they're going to start to fade off and think to themselves, they're not paying attention.
This is a huge one. And if you do this in your life in general, you will be seen as a good communicator.
Yes.
Better than many.
Yes, so true. Okay, number 4, clarify by asking questions. If the person is saying something and you're trying to grasp it and you just don't, it's okay.
This is level 4 listening.
Yes.
This is the one that takes you to the next level.
Yes. Ask some questions, right? Not asking questions so you can combat it, but it's because you really want to understand what they're saying. So I love being able to ask questions.
Again, back to intimacy. Having a conversation about intimacy might be hard to do, but if you can ask questions about your spouse's experience with it, that right there is huge, because most people don't do that when it comes to the hard topics.
It's so true. Number 5, actively move away and put away distractions. So if you guys are having a conversation in a room and there are other things that are outside of your control that could be distractions, it could be that you just reposition your body to show, hey, I'm still engaged, I'm still here. I know there's stuff going on back there, but I'm here with you. I'm present. Let's do this. And let's be real, the phone pretty much distracts most of us. We just need to put it away before we enter conversations. It's such an awesome message that's not even verbal that says, I'm here to pay attention. Let's get into it. And let's see, number 6, be committed to understanding what is trying to be communicated. If you are angry or if you are upset or if it bothers you or makes you sad, that's okay. Those emotions are totally allowed to show up and be there. But be committed that even though you're feeling those things, to still understand. So at the end, I want you to just kind of ask yourself, am I a real and total listener? We don't want you pointing fingers at your spouse and saying, you're not following the checklist. We're never going to do that.
Well, no one masters this overnight. This is something that takes a lot of practice and time.
Yeah. And you might be working on, let's say, reinforcing the speaker by nodding and paraphrasing. And your spouse may look at this list and say, you know what? I'm going to work on maintaining good eye contact. So you can still be working on it and still be working on 2 different things. Yeah. So again, this is personal, it's self-observation, and it's self-improvement.
Well, let me just add this. A lot of these things seem very obvious, I'm sure. Because in our minds, we can say, okay, yeah, I can see why these are good for the listening checklist. But putting it into practice is what you need to do now. Just knowing something and having a desire to know it isn't enough. You have to actually act and commit to it. And we promise you, if you do this, you will have much better communication with not only your spouse, but everybody.
So true. Now, before we flip the page, there's going to be one more listening skill on this checklist. And it's a big one. So pay close attention.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Interrupting cow.
Interrupting
Moo! Such a stupid joke, but I love that one. All right. The big one is interrupting. I love this bomb because you want to ruin a conversation, interrupt a lot.
Yeah.
And there are some people that cannot help themselves because they don't think about it. They just want to be heard so badly, or they think that what they're saying is so important. And so while they're listening to someone else, all they're doing is thinking about what they're going to say next.
Yeah.
And this is the biggest trap of listening. And this is something that's hard for everybody at different levels. You know somebody who can't stop talking, and you know somebody who interrupts a lot. Everyone knows somebody like this. It might be you, and if it is, great. You have an opportunity to change that and to improve. So this is one of the biggest signs that you are not in the process of real and total listening. So stop it. If someone else does this, again, You don't get mad at them, but really try to do your best in that conversation. You may be at a point with someone and have the kind of relationship where you can say, hold on, let me finish. Don't let them completely sabotage you. It's okay to say, let me finish this thought. Hold on a second. But do it out of love. Don't get, choose not to get mad at them. Choose to understand them still. Even as you listen, you're going to understand in real listening, hey, this is somebody who is an interrupter. This is someone who, for whatever reason, this is part of their personality, or they have a hard time with this. So when you say, hold on a second, let me finish my thought, you're not doing it because you're saying, well, you're an idiot, I hate you. You're saying, look, let me finish this thought so that we can have good communication. So again, you're back to you doing what is best for the conversation and just doing your best. The other person is going to learn how you communicate just by watching you. It's awesome.
Yes. If you do know someone who is a constant interrupter, a good rule of thumb is to just let them go first.
Yeah.
Right? Because they have so much on their mind and they're going to have a really hard time listening because they just want to get it out. Let them go first.
Yeah.
Communication has nothing to do with who goes first, right? So just let them go first, let them get it out, and they'll probably be able to listen much more effectively.
And you'll enjoy the conversation a lot more too.
Yes, so true. Okay, the second big part of communication is to be able to express ourselves effectively, not ineffectively, because the whole world can do that. We want to be able to express ourselves effectively. So we want to accomplish one of 4 goals, kind of like the same setup as with listening. We want to create connection. Sometimes that may be the only reason we enter into conversations is we want to be social. We want to have that connection. We want to feel more love and care for another person. And if you have, let's say you've been married for 10 years, this can still be one of your goals. Like, hey, we're just going to have this conversation. I just want to be connected, right? It's awesome. Another reason to learn to express yourself effectively is for personal development. Not your spouse's development. That's their job to work on. It's your own development. When you can learn how to convey your thoughts effectively, efficiently, so that they're really understood by another person, man, you are leveling up. You are gaining skills. And it does make other people want to listen to you because they feel like they're also learning something. And it's a very reciprocal process. The third one is to clarify confusion. If there are concerns that you guys are involved in and you're in the discussion, it's to clarify where the problems are, right? And it's usually because we have 2 different people thinking 2 different things about the same situation.
Well, that's always going to be the case.
Yes.
You're always going to have some differences in the way you perceive reality.
Yes. And so clarifying this communication is one of the reasons we go to try to express ourselves.
Well, we learn a lot when we do this, clarify confusion, because when we talk, let's say we're talking about a child of ours and we're concerned or something happened, Shelly's going to see something that I don't see that is important to me. I just didn't see it because I was focusing on something else and vice versa. So when we share and we clarify confusion, I also can expand my perspective of that situation and those circumstances, so then I can, have a more informed thought process about it.
Yeah. I think this is one of those things, I love that you mentioned this, that we can underestimate. Having differences of opinion with somebody, and when you do see things differently and think differently, hearing and being able to talk about those, they expand our human experience. Instead of just having a one way of doing things, a very limited experience, we get to have an expanded human experience. It's awesome. So again, it's not something to be afraid of when we have differences of opinions, but that as we go into knowing it, like this conversation is going to clear up some confusion. That can feel very motivating to be able to enter it without all that tension that sometimes naturally comes with it. And then finally is to contribute. I love this concept that when we are speaking and we're having conversations, that there's something we can bring to the table. And even if it's not always ideas and solutions and things like that, it's just expanding another person's mind into our experience. How we're thinking about that is contributing to whoever is on the other end.
Yeah.
So it really is awesome to go into a conversation and say, okay, what am I going to bring to the table? Which one of these things, these goals do I want to accomplish during this conversation?
Okay, some more kind of obvious ones that you might think in your mind, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But I guarantee you, you don't do this all the time because nobody does. But here's a checklist of things that help you to be effective, okay? Use I statements. Use an I statement with me. What would that look like?
I am feeling very nervous filming this video right now.
So we're not talking about the I as in I'm this and I'm that and I'm like focusing on myself all the time and like
No.
I just want to make it all about me.
It's not bragging.
It's not bragging at all. Using I statements really is to express how you're really feeling and the things that you might be scared of or the things that you might be worried about or the things that you want to reveal.
Yes.
And those things are really important. But using those I statements is important because it helps the other person know how to connect with you.
And I also want to point out that when you're using an I statement, you're acting like an adult.
Yes.
It's a very mature way to communicate. 3-year-olds are the opposite of this, right? Because they start so many sentences with, you did this, Johnny did that, Susie did that. It's very much a blame game.
So using I statements should help you to get out of a mode where you're blaming the other person.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's probably the number one reason for it.
Yes, you have to think differently.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's an amazing thing. So it's something to practice. So when you're talking to somebody, use I statements and think about it in terms of not blaming somebody else. It's probably, for me, that's the easiest way to think about it.
Yeah. So
Number 2, use whole messages, not incomplete ones, right? Don't leave things out.
no.
Don't leave it out. Don't sugarcoat, right? Be kind, but being kind doesn't mean that you have to always be nice, right? Sometimes you have to say things that are bold, but share whole messages so that they're not confused about the things that you're talking about. If you only share partial messages, they're going to be like, what the heck? He said this, but then did this, and it is very confusing.
Very confusing.
Align your body language to support the message. Okay, again, that's back to the attitude matching your words. But when you're actually aligning your body language and your whole attitude toward the message, they're going to understand what you're talking about. Having conversations like this are much better received when you are straightforward and also have an attitude of helpfulness. And so, again, back to the body language and the attitude, don't try to make it better than it is or worse than it is, right? Try to be consistent.
Yeah.
Again, that goes along with number 4 too. Match your voice to your message, volume, tone, pace, and pitch. Right? So these two really do go together. So just be honest, because we can lie with our body language.
Yes.
That's something that all of us know how to do, whether you realize it or not. You can lie with your body language. We don't want to do that. We want to be honest when we communicate. It'll save you a lot of time in the long run. Number 5, use the self-coaching model to express your process. I think this is great because this is an opportunity that you can say, look, my process is this. This is the way I think about things. Circumstances are the facts, the things I can't change. And the way that I respond to them is with my thoughts, which then impact my feelings, which then impact the actions I take, which then impact the results. Sharing your process with somebody and the way that you look at the world is amazing because then they can learn from that.
Yeah.
It's really good. But then they understand how you see the world.
I love this express your process. I think it's such a good mantra for us to keep in mind when it comes to communication. Because if we're just expressing our process and how we are really going through things and how we're really interpreting things and thinking about things, again, it takes blame out.
Yeah.
You're not trying to tell everyone else how they're going through their process. But if you own your own and try to communicate that, it is much more effective. And the other person will really be able to listen to that with their defenses down.
Well, of course, their defenses are going to be down because when you express your process, especially when it comes to the self-coaching model, then they know that blame is out the window.
Yeah.
You're not blaming them.
No.
you're trying to help improve the situation or trying to help resolve a challenge or trying to help them with something or trying to get them to help you in some way. But there's no blame, there's no unnecessary emotions that can cloud the facts, right? Stick to the facts, ma'am. Shelley's talked about this. You know, if a police officer is interviewing you about, you know, something that happens, you know, maybe you witnessed somebody steal something and, you know, the cop's asking you about it and you go on and on and on and on about your emotions. Oh my gosh, it was so scary and all this. He just wants to know the facts. What did you see?
Yes.
What did you hear? With your senses and what you observed, what are the facts? Okay?
Yeah, it's a way more effective way to communicate. When you stick to facts, then there's an understanding that, like, yes, everyone else's interpretation is their own, but let's all start with the facts. And then there's a higher level of understanding, a higher level of compassion and care, and room for plenty of space to really understand another person's perspective. So starting with the facts and keeping the facts in mind is such a fabulous place to start.
Wonderful.
All right. Okay, now just like Nick had brought up, this is one of the best and most effective ways to communicate, is using the self-coaching model.
It really is.
So we want to give you some really practical ways to use the self-coaching model when you are speaking, when you are expressing your process. And if you just keep the self-coaching model in mind and use I statements, you pretty much have it made. So just as a review, the self-coaching model, we all deal with circumstances in our lives that we can't change right then and there in the moment. We can't control those things right when we're in them. And whenever we face a circumstance, it triggers us to have a thought about it. Your thoughts are going to be different than your spouse's thoughts almost in every circumstance.
And that's great.
Yes. Your own thoughts will trigger your own feelings. And those specific feelings will trigger you to take very specific actions that are in correspondence with the emotion that just ignited it. And then your actions lead to the final results. So what does this look like when we're trying to communicate? This is what it looks like. When I saw this thing, or when I heard these words, I thought this. And you just say what the sentence was in your mind, what your thought was. And I felt blank. We do not have a whole sentence here. We have one word. I felt sad. I felt frustrated. I felt annoyed. I felt used. Whatever word goes here, it's one word. It's one emotion, one feeling. And so after you say, I felt this, I did this. This is the action I took, which resulted in blank. So you can see we have it structured for you very clearly in accordance with the self-coaching model. This is very thorough communication. You are addressing the fact that just took place. You are addressing your thought, your feeling about it, the action you took, and the final result. This is full accountability, full responsibility. As an adult, it is extremely mature and there is zero blame in this.
I just want to point out the I statements. When I saw, I thought, I felt, I did. Yes, that's what we mean by I statements. Because I think people easily get confused by I statements.
Yeah.
Because we're told so often, don't say I so much. Well, this is a different kind of I statement.
Yeah.
Okay? This is a very effective way to share your actual truthful experience.
Yes. All right. So now you guys have this outline, super effective. You can use it with your spouse, but you can use it with anybody. So the more you get into the habit of using this, the better your communication will be.
The only thing that you don't have control over is the circumstance. It's the only thing. You don't control this. This is something that happens out of your control. But you control all these things. If you can control your thoughts and you can choose more productive thoughts, you're going to have much better feelings about it. And the actions you take are going to be more positive and they're going to be more impactful in the ways that you want them to be impactful. And then the result is going to be better, right? Just remember, you choose these. This one you don't. When you actually are using this as a communication tool, while you're communicating this, I guarantee you're going to realize, oh, this could have gone better.
Yes.
This could have been different.
Yes.
And what you're communicating could have been so much different. And that's how you learn how to respond to circumstances more productively.
Correct. If you are using this method to express yourself and to communicate, your own level of self-awareness will skyrocket.
Oh, yeah.
And you will become a better communicator, no doubt. So it's a win-win.
Okay, just like no interrupting, no you statements. Again, this goes back. The fundamental lesson here is blame. Don't blame, right? When we use you statements in communication, usually it's blame. If it's something positive and, you're trying to compliment somebody, that's different, and I think that can even become fake, right? But if you focus on the I statements and then use the you statements very sparingly, but for the right reasons and outside of blame, awesome. But this is how we fall into traps of blaming and saying, oh, you always, you never, you did this. This is something that is going to lead you to that question, am I expressing myself effectively? Right? So as you're having conversations, pay attention to how you say things, but also what your meaning is. Right? If you're using those you statements with your spouse, I guarantee you that there are times when you're saying those things trying to make them feel bad or trying to invoke an emotion. Maybe it's a light guilt, right? Does it matter?
Light guilt.
Light guilt.
Slightly buttered.
Right? But when you take accountability for your participation in whatever that circumstance is versus focusing on them, things will go better.
So true. Okay, this is the third part of communication, is being able to understand the intentions of the other person. You already know your own intentions. Mm-hmm. The goal with communication is to understand the other person's intention, what they actually are trying to convey. So we want to look at 4 goals again with this. We need to improve our own skills. Humans are social beings. It is a survival skill. It is well documented that if babies don't have social interaction when they are super, super young and for a certain amount of time, they will die.
Failure to thrive.
Failure to thrive. We are created to be social. And so developing these social skills and communication skills is part of our survival. But we never think about it that way. But I think it's good to think about it this way. So we can improve these skills so that the human species and our own children can survive better, because once we develop these skills, we're going to pass them on to our children.
Before you move on, just think for a second. When you're not communicating with your spouse, or maybe it's your, sibling or your parents or whatever, anybody that you're kind of, in that state where you're not talking, that doesn't feel good. When we're communicating and we feel free and we're able to express ourselves and get a response to that expression, that is meaningful.
Yeah.
If we're not communicating, then all of a sudden we're like, why am I even married?
Yeah.
I don't like this anymore. I wonder when divorce starts to creep into people's minds. This is when it does.
Yeah, so true. Another goal to have in mind is to relieve pressure. A lot of times when things have gone unspoken for a certain amount of time, or there is a concern that needs to be addressed, there's a certain amount of pressure and stress that has built up. And being able to say, you know what, it's time to have a conversation about this. It's time to communicate effectively. It relieves so much pressure for yourself and for your spouse to just say, oh, finally we're talking about this.
Oh, yeah.
Even if you don't get to the solution in that conversation, just the relief in and of itself is a beautiful and wonderful gift. So if there's ever moments where you're a little nervous about having the harder conversations, I want you to pay attention to this and really think about, this is a gift. It is a gift to both of us on an individual level, but also for the marriage, that just starting the conversation, having it, being involved in it, it does relieve some of the pressure.
And this still happens to us all the time, right? Sometimes there's just unspoken weirdness.
Yeah.
And it could be about anything. And it might not be that big of a deal at the beginning of it, but the longer it goes, the more weird it gets. And so that pressure, the relief, oh, I can relate with that so much. When we're finally talking about something, it's so easy to forget that weirdness.
Yeah.
Or that stress or that resentment or whatever emotion that you're having.
Yeah, so true. The third goal to have in mind is that as you are in the process of communicating and expressing and you're using these techniques, it increases trust. If you are really trying to communicate and you're being honest and you're not leaving certain things out to manipulate or whatever, this increases trust. Because again, if you are sending mixed messages and your body language is saying one thing and your words are another, it really will challenge trust. Mm-hmm. And man, when trust is challenged in a relationship, it can bleed out into every other aspect in a negative way.
It will.
Yes. So it's really good to say, man, I'm not super excited about this conversation. It might be a little bit more difficult than I'm used to, but it will help to increase trust between us. That is an amazing goal. And finally, it's to collaborate or problem solve. Sometimes we need to have those conversations where we got to get to a solution. We got to start brainstorming. And so that can also be one of the goals you have in conversations. But again, it's not the only goal. It's not the only reason we express our thoughts and our feelings and the things that we're doing, but it is one of them. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then we get to self-reflect and ask how we are doing with expressing ourselves. Are we effective? So we can ask, am I understanding the message that they intended me to correctly? Oh, so important and such a good message. Are we understanding our spouse's intentions throughout the entire conversation?
Okay, and back to a checklist. Okay, so I'm just going to run through this pretty quickly. Understanding their intended message checklist. This is how you will know that you're understanding what they're saying. Number 1, repeat and restate what your spouse said or whoever it is that you're talking to. This is something that if you're doing, check. Awesome. You're heading in the right direction. Number 2, ask clarifying questions. Did I get that right? Am I still missing an important part of this? Right? You're curious. You're interested. You're going to ask questions if you feel that way. If you want to help them, if you want to understand, then you're going to choose. And choosing means that you're going to take some action, and that's questions. That's that level 4. If you're not doing that, then you're missing out on a lot. Okay? Because they're not even going to remember everything that they're telling you. When you're asking questions, you're going to get a lot more of their story because they might be like, oh yeah, let me tell you this part of it or that part of it. And that goes along with number 3, be genuinely curious about how they are experiencing things. If you're genuinely curious, you're going to ask questions and you're going to actively listen. Number 4, summarize, restate. That way they know that you're getting it. And if you get it wrong, back to number 2 or 3, right? You're going to get it right if you're really sifting through what they're saying. Number 5, increase your sincerity and show your empathy, right? Show it, but also really have some empathy. Try to put yourself in their shoes, try to understand where they're coming from, and also your compassion, okay? And then finally, if you focus on all of these, if you're actually going through this checklist, you will be the best listener in the world. Because there's really nothing else that great listeners do. Great listeners do these things to understand the other person that they're communicating with.
Yeah. And I also wanted to point out just a few words that are underlined on this page because it really ties in with number 6. We see like repeat and restate what your spouse says. You're asking them questions. You're curious about how they are experiencing. You're summarizing their words. Sometimes we think we're getting the message, but we're not. Yeah. And so going through this process and saying like, am I getting what you really want me to get is significant.
All right, here's another time bomb. Don't assume. When people assume, they make an ass out of you and me. How does that go? Yeah. Something like that, right? Don't make assumptions. It's so easy to do that. And now, if you make assumptions, what's going to happen? Right? You've already heard everything. You're not going to be curious about what they're really saying. No. You're not going to be sympathetic or empathetic or, really genuine about your helpfulness in this communication session, you're making assumptions. That means that you're telling yourself what the story is. Yeah, there's times when Shelly goes on and on and on. I'm like, come on, get to the point, right? But if I feel like that I already got it and I'm just going to assume that I know what she's saying, then I'm going to stop listening to her. And I'm usually wrong. So don't assume you're right. Never assume your spouse is wrong. Always assume your own assumptions are wrong. Always challenge your own assumptions. If you do this, you're way ahead. Because that way you're going to avoid these pitfalls. And these are real pitfalls. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how high your IQ is or your EQ or whatever your experience is. Most of the time when we assume, we're at least partly wrong about the whole picture.
So true. Okay, so we want to give you some other options to think about, some other tools to use when it comes to communication. I really love this one because you see this in elementary schools. And it's just such a good refresher. If you've never heard it, I hope you liked it. If you did hear it in 6th grade or something, I hope will spark that part of your brain and go, oh yeah, that is a good guideline. Think before you speak, right? This is getting our brain to slow down for just a second before we say things that we're going to regret. We can say things that are super negative and create storms and rain on another person's life. Or we can say things in a way that bring light and sunshine and add enlightenment to their lives. And so every word that comes out of our mouth, we can say, am I a person who is bringing the storm and not in a good way, or sucking the light out of somebody's life? Or am I giving light? Am I sharing and spreading light and offering light and sharing light? That is within our power with our words. So think before you speak. It's an acronym. Are your words the letter T, true, the letter H, helpful, the letter I, inspiring, the letter N, necessary, and the letter K, kind? A lot of times we can bring up difficult things in a kind way. And if we go through this acronym and have that in mind, it challenges us to become more intelligent, to think a little bit clearer on the way we're going to deliver some news that may not be the most positive, but we can still do it in a kind way. So I love these just 5 little words with the word think before you speak, and see if they fall into these categories.
Okay, you want to know something that will bring you closer and bring you joy? We've been talking about this whole time. We've been talking about something that really is actually exciting, because it isn't just the conversation. It's what happens after. It's what happens in your life when you're communicating effectively. It's what brings the joy to your relationship. It really does. So when we're effectively communicating about ourselves to another person, our relationship will be super meaningful. If you're not doing this, your relationship will dwindle. I promise you that. It will dwindle if you're not working on communication. So this right here is so important, because when people hear the word intimacy, they think physical intimacy almost all the time. We are such huge proponents of emotional intimacy. I don't care how often you have sex, right? I don't care. That number is meaningless to me, right? And it should be to you too, because if you're building emotional intimacy, you're going to have sex the right number of times for you, right? And you're going to be able to communicate. And I'd say this for guys: if you want to have sex more and you want to have physical intimacy more, focus on this one, right? If you want to enjoy it and have your wife enjoy it too, like I'm to the point now in my life where I don't want to have physical intimacy unless Shelly's going to enjoy it. It's not interesting to me. I guess I'm old enough now where I don't just want to like get off all the time like I felt more like when I was younger. I just wanted to have sex because I'm a guy and whatever. And my desire is higher than my wife when it comes to just physical intimacy. But when we are connected through emotional intimacy, and the best way to do that is through communication, we are physically intimate a lot more often than we would be. Yeah. And especially because my desire is for her to enjoy it too. I don't want to just be the only one that enjoys it and then it's like kind of wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Like, I'm not interested in that at all. I want her to enjoy it. This is the way to do it. Okay? So Just telling you how I feel about it. The more self-awareness you have and the more information you consistently move into the open self, the better your communication will be. The more open you become, you give that other person a lot more to grab onto as far as connection, right? If you think about two things kind of coming together and growing together, the more open you are, the more authentic you are, the more honest you are, the more interested you are in them, you will become more and more connected. And that's what emotional intimacy is all about.
So true. The more you are able to heighten and increase your communication skills, the more the relationship evolves. And when you can evolve as a couple, that is exciting because it's like you never know everything about one another. But as you bring in communication skills and you're able to share ideas and dreams in an effective way, the relationship evolves. Think about a time where you really wanted to accomplish something and you just felt stuck. Like you couldn't move forward. You wanted to, but you couldn't. This is what it feels like to be depressed. This is depression. When we want to move forward, but we're stuck and we can't. Being able to communicate effectively keeps the relationship evolving forward. And that is exciting.
Yes.
Okay, so Nick just talked about part of the excitement of communication is being this open self. And we wanted to offer to you and share with you something called the Johari window of self-awareness. This is something most people don't know about unless you've specifically taken a class about it, a communications class. This doesn't show up in a lot of books, but it is so valuable. So we wanted to bring it to your attention now so you can start incorporating this. So we have this window, right? And this is like a window into ourselves, our own self-awareness. And we have these different components. Here we have things that are not known to ourselves. We're going to go down this column. Things that are known to ourselves down this column. And going across this way in the rows, we have things that are known to other people. And then things that are not known to other people. So we end up with these 4 quadrants. Now, most of us are going to end up, or we're going to start in the unknown, which means it's not known to us and things about ourselves are not known to others. This is happening at an unconscious level. We're not aware, and either is anyone else. This is where we all start. What happens is we end up kind of moving up into this quadrant. When we are faced with new experiences that challenge us, all of a sudden we're like, I kind of didn't know that about myself, but now I'm faced with something new. So it's still not known to yourself, but someone else is noticing something in you. This is the place where a lot of therapy, a lot of mentorship, counseling, and life coaching exist. This is an awesome place to be. We have our own blind spots. All of us do. And sometimes we need that expert to come in and say, hey, I've noticed you're doing this and this and this. This is what life coaches do all day long. This
is also what spouses do all day long when they're communicating effectively.
Yeah, it's
Shelley,
so true.
One of the greatest things about being married is that your spouse will help you see things about yourself that you never saw before.
Yeah. It's okay to have blind spots, right? It's not like, I have these flaws. We just aren't aware of them. And facing new situations and circumstances in marriage will start to kind of lift those blinders. So then we kind of move into this quadrant, the hidden self, the masking, right? We're going to put up a facade. Like now we're discovering things about ourselves. Do we want to reveal all these things about ourselves, right? Sometimes we choose to hide things. And so these things are known. We know them, but we are choosing not to reveal them to other people. And that can be also what starts to create a lot of problems in a marriage. This part usually doesn't, the blind spot. The hidden self, that will create a lot of mistrust. So then what we want to do is take the things that we're hiding and that we're stuffing deep down and say, I need to bring it up into this quadrant of the open self. It's known to myself and it's known to others. This quadrant right here is the most authentic self. This is where we communicate really well. We're working through things. We're being able to say, hey, I was here and I was struggling with this. That's okay. I'm human. And I wondered what to do about it.
Yeah.
And now I'm here. I'm being open with it. I'm being raw. I'm being vulnerable. And I'm here for the ride. And we're going to work through it. In each of these, to keep life very exciting, there's an action step. So we don't ever have to say, well, I'm stuck here. I don't know what to do. This is the excitement of being married. So we're going to give you an action step for each one.
And trust me, it's a lot more exciting to do this than just to talk about it.
Yes. So if there are things about yourself that are unknown, which is for everybody, that part is very big, actually. Let us help you. Seek new challenges and experiences. This is like, get outdoors, create dates, do things that you've wanted to do, dream big, experience life. Because what's going to happen is going to reveal some blind spots.
Oh, yeah.
And that's good. This is good. This is being human. It's having the full human experience.
This is what honeymoons are all about.
Yes, very much so.
What did I marry?
What? Okay, so when you get here to the blind spot and now you're like, oh, I thought I was like this, but I'm realizing maybe I'm not as easy to live with as I thought. What do? Seek help and feedback. Yes, life coaching. Congratulations, you guys are here. You're way ahead of the game. You are way ahead of the game. But if things come up, let's say 3 years from now, don't wait around. Say, you know what? I'm meant to spend time here. I'm meant to start addressing things and have people say, this is where we can make some improvements. Get coaching. Then what happens when we say, okay, I discovered things about myself and I'm hiding them? What do? The action step is share. Share what is going on with you, with your spouse.
But it's hard to do that because the reason I'm masking is because I'm scared to share.
Yes. And so that's why these communication skills that we've talked about are so valuable. Because if you use the self-coaching model to communicate, you can say, I feel scared.
It's also denial, right? Like, oh, you say I'm this way, but I'm not, right?
Yeah.
But talk about it. Talk through it. Share your insights about it. So talk about something that you know is in the way because you're not sharing it with your spouse. Talk to them about it and start the conversation. And hopefully, as you do the things that we're talking about, you won't feel as scared because they'll respond in a way that's curious and empathetic and loving.
Yeah.
So you're going to discover what you were scared of sharing really was an illusion that you created. And so you're going to find that they're going to be way more empathetic and loving more than you thought they would be.
Yes. Okay, so now we are in the open self. So what would be the action step if we're in the open self? Let's find out. It's to have discussions. It's to continue to develop as a person. It's to continue to evolve. And it's about contributing and being creative. Again, those are exciting and fun things to be involved in. And if you are living constantly in this hidden self, it's much harder to enjoy the goodness of living in the open self.
This is how you become one in life together.
So true. So, how do we create excitement? Take action in each section constantly be moving and evolving. That's exciting stuff.
Okay, so just a breakdown of how much time we're going to spend in those 4 quadrants. It's pretty simple. You want to be an open, blind, and unknown more than hidden. Okay? Unknown, less. Open and blind, okay? They're kind of equal. You want to get to open, though. You have a goal to get there. All right? Just to break down how much time. You're going to spend time in all of them. You're human. And as you progress and as you become more and more one, you're going to spend more and more time here, obviously. But you're going to have times when you slip back into these other areas. You only really know yourself to the extent that you are known. That is a deep thought.
Yes.
Your thoughts, feelings, needs, and wants often remain vague and clouded until you put them into words. That's so true. Putting them into words helps a lot. Now you have something to deal with, other than just like this unknown feeling that you have. The process of communicating adds shape, color, and detail to your dreams and ignites the fire of desire. Who's not interested in that?
Yeah. So when you think about how you spend your time in life, this could be like a good model. Involving new challenges and new experiences in your life is part of evolving and growing as a person. So adding those fun elements into the relationship is important. We can't neglect it. In the Proclamation for the Family, one of the reasons they talk about healthy recreation is for this reason. It helps us grow and develop. We want to spend time in the blind because this is where we're learning and progressing and taking in that information that we need to spend time there. We can't just bypass that and say, I don't ever want to learn things. I don't ever want to face things or grow. No, we have to spend time here. The reason the hidden is so smaller is because we don't want to spend our lives hiding. This is pure misery. This takes a decision, and a decision can be made in 1 second. Now we're going to move into the open self. So we really want to keep in mind that this hidden section needs to remain little. Okay, another awesome communication tool. We really wanted to bring this one in because if you can learn this, this is one of those ones that are really easy to pass on to your children. And children love this one. And it's such a quick and fast way to communicate with your spouse. So this is based on a book called The Zones of Regulation. So we're not going to take any credit, but we're going to give all the credit where it's due. This book is an amazing book. And it was written for children who actually really struggle to communicate. And sometimes they have developmental delays or they're facing some mental illness. And this is one of the ways that they teach children how to communicate. So you're going to communicate by saying what color zone you're in. So even if you don't have all the right words to totally express everything, just saying like, I'm in the blue, your spouse is going to say, I know what she means. So the green is like you're calm, you're focused, you feel good about where you are in life, you're happy. It's like the stop sign, right? When it's green, it's go time. If you're in the green, you're high functioning, high productivity, you're getting things done, you're motivated. It's a great place to be. But we're not always in the green, are we?
No.
No, we're human. So we spend a lot of time not in the green.
I'm actually in the blue zone right now. My back is hurting.
Nick's in the blue. So if you're in the blue, sometimes you're bored, you're sad, you're tired.
I'm tired. I'm not sad. I'm happy being here.
Yeah.
But I've had these back issues and my feet hurt. I'm getting older. And so standing here for a while, I love this, but it hurts.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
It is okay.
It's okay. You don't have to always be in the green zone.
No. And the goal is to not always be in the green zone. The goal is awareness and to be able to communicate what zone you're in. That is the goal. And so if you're sick too, that's the blue zone. So just to give you some context and an example, we had a son who had a lot of sensory issues when he was young and had a really hard time being able to communicate how he was feeling. He couldn't put the emotion with words. So he was taught this, and then he could easily say, I'm in the blue, I'm in the yellow, I'm in the red. And we just knew exactly what that meant. So it's really, really effective. The yellow, this is when you're worried, you're frustrated, or on the opposite side, you're over silly, over animated, over everything, and over excited. So sometimes if we get into the yellow, we will end up going to the red if we don't recognize it. And so being able to say, hey, I'm feeling one of these things is kind of like the flashing neon sign. It's like the yellow on a stop sign that's like, hey, you might need to slow down a bit.
Yeah.
And then finally we have red. This is like those really intense negative emotions. We have anger. We're scared or terrified. We're panicked. And our emotions are over the top on either end of the emotional spectrum. So usually when we're in the red, it really is time to stop what we're doing, take some moments to collect ourselves, and try to move back to the green. It's not like we want to move into the yellow or the blue. We really want to get back into the green.
That's the goal. I mean, that should be the goal.
It is the goal. The goal is to spend more time in the green. But recognize we don't eliminate these.
Yeah.
And the goal is not to avoid, it's to say, this is where I am right now. I didn't mean to get here, but this is where I am.
Okay, just a really simple way to communicate the zones. Shelley already talked about this, so I'll just go through it quickly. This is a way to express, I'm in the blue zone, just like our son would say. I'm in the yellow zone, right? I need to take a minute to relax, or I'm in the red. Whatever it is that works for you, you guys figure that out. But saying I'm in the zone, that's a good way to start a conversation.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to stop there. It shouldn't stop there. We're adults. We can have that conversation deeper than this. But this is a good way to start communication. Ask, what zone are you in? Right? How you feeling is more of a vague question. If you say, what zone are you in? If you know what the zones are, that's a really great way to kind of center in or focus on what are the things that you're feeling right now. Well, now all of a sudden I know that it's going to be a few things.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the whole list of emotions. I know that when you say that, I know how I'm going to respond too, because you're going to start to really understand each other and what you need when you're in certain zones. And putting it in a simple way like this is super helpful.
Yeah.
So this is very simple, beautiful communication. And you can use other colors for other things as well as in marriage. So maybe you have a purple zone, and that means that you're in the mood.
Ooh.
Or the pink zone, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You can make this stuff up for you. There's no rule on this. Get creative with it. But at least this is a simple way for you to get to the bottom of how you're feeling really fast.
Yes. Okay, and the final skill we want to teach you that has to do with communication is called the talking stick. This is one of our favorites. We have awesome stories about when we first learned about this and started using it, but we have a deep love in our hearts for the talking stick. And it's very simple. You can use anything, Okay, Nick just found a marker.
Anything that you can hold, right?
Yes.
So
This is our talking stick. Okay, so the person holding the talking stick is the only one allowed to speak without interruptions. I love this because this is a rule for using the talking stick. Whoever's holding it, it's a visual cue. You are the one talking. The other person is engaged in listening. Now, we want to just point out the goal is to not be long-winded and talk for 2 hours straight, because at that point, the listener will become fatigued. And
now it's my turn to talk.
They'll want to take the stick from you and hit you with it. It's going to be really hard for them to retain what you're actually saying. The listening will just start to deteriorate. We don't want to do that. We want communication to be effective. So whoever's speaking and holding the talking stick, we're going to give you a time limit to start, 2 minutes. Okay, so then you pass the stick.
And number 2 is the listener repeats, restates, or asks a question to clarify what was said by the speaker. They may not argue or make their point yet. Okay, so after I do this, I'm just going to clarify and then pass it back.
Then the speaker continues and clarifies any confusion. And then we repeat the process until the speaker is satisfied that they have been understood correctly. So we just continue to pass this back and forth. If he restates and it's like half there and half not, that's what this process is for. Switch and start again. Then the listener becomes the speaker, and now they get to share their point of view, their thoughts, their feelings, all of those things. And they get to do it uninterrupted.
This is such a great way to get everything out on the table. It really is. Go through this process. You're going to be able to get everything out that you want to talk about. And you're not going to hold anything back because you have a process and you know what's expected. This is a communication lifesaver, especially if you're having problems communicating.
Yes.
Right? So if you learn how to do this naturally, great. You don't need a talking stick. We don't use a talking stick very much anymore. But when we were first married and we were learning how to communicate, we would use a talking stick because there were times when I would go on and on and on and Shelley wouldn't get out everything that she wanted to. I'm a little bit more of a talker and I have no problem saying what's on my mind. She had a little bit of a harder time doing that. So the talking stick helped to make sure that I did not dominate the conversation. right? And I didn't want to dominate the conversation. I wanted her to speak up, but I'm telling you, this helped
Yes.
us a lot.
And I just also want to throw out I remember one time when we were driving in the car and we started to get into a heated discussion. We didn't have a talking stick, but we were still new in learning this process and we wanted to use it. And I remember Nick just looked over and he grabbed his wallet and he said, "This is our talking stick." And then we immediately started using it and the conversation was able to be so much more effective. And so it doesn't have to be a stick. It's whatever you can just hold on to when you're first learning the process. And like Nick said, 20 years later into our marriage, we don't have to physically hold a talking stick. We've already developed the skill.
Okay, like every month we have communication cards, then we also have his, her connections. So the communication card this month is, I'm in the zone. Again, back to starting conversations. All of our communication cards, every single month, those are wonderful ways to start a discussion. Talk about those topics or whatever your challenge is. This is a great one. I'm in the blank zone. Just like I told Shelly earlier, even when we were off camera, I'm like, and I was probably a little bit more frustrated because my back is hurting really bad. And I'm like, my back hurts really bad. And I didn't use my skills. I should have just said, I'm in the blue zone, babe. And then she would have known better. I'm like, no, my back hurts and my feet hurt. I don't need to say all that stuff. I could just say, I'm in the blue zone. Let's use the talking stick. 2 things to start a great conversation. His, her connections. You'll see those. If you're getting the box in the mail, you'll see the cards in there. If you're watching this and you have the digital program, then you'll be able to see, this is attached to this video, you'll see the his, her connections. And those are questions to ask each other over the next 30 days. And what a great way to communicate is ask questions.
Yes. Okay, and finally, we'd love to give you guys some date ideas. And you are receiving this in the month of March. So we decided to add a little bit of those elements into these dates. But one date idea is go find a talking stick, right? Actually have one when you're first learning this. So take a walk together, go to a park, go out in nature, find a talking stick. It doesn't matter what it looks like. Or create one yourself. If you like to do woodworking, create a talking stick. It's
Decorate
awesome.
it.
Yes. Number 2, be Irish for a day. Start talking like an Irishman or an Irishwoman. Create leprechaun names for each other. These are all over the internet, right? You take the first letter of your first name and the month you were born in, and you put them together and it gives you like a leprechaun name. This is so fun. It's a fun and funny element to add to the relationship. When you guys are out to dinner or out with friends, you guys can call each other these names just to like add that element of humor in, right? Discover some interesting Irish phrases and start trying to use them and see if you can use them correctly, because it will force you to be like, what does that mean? Is this the right context? It will just heighten your listening and your communication skills.
You know what's great about the Irish thing is it's not cultural appropriation yet.
No.
Right? Like, we're allowed to do that and not feel bad about it, right?
Yes.
This is fun.
It's awesome. This is a fun thing. Okay, the third idea, make corned beef and cabbage. This is a traditional Irish dish, but it gives you an opportunity to like go through the recipe, to talk through things, to work together and to collaborate. You can do this while you're listening to Irish bands. There are so many out there.
They're really
U2, Ed Sheeran. I mean, there are so many.
Glenn Hansard.
Yes. Please look up some Irish bands and listen to it while you're making corned beef and cabbage. And if you're not a good cook, this is a great one to do. It's hard to mess up. It just cooks most of the day and it turns out tasting awesome. This is why I love this one. Okay, and finally, play the game Helping Hand. And what that is that you're going to challenge one another to do something that usually takes 2 hands, like buttoning up a shirt. And one spouse is only going to use one hand. And the other spouse is also going to use one hand. And you guys are going to work together to say, okay, I need you to do this with your hand. And it will force you to communicate pretty specifically to get certain things done. So I would do like 5 or 10 different challenges.
Try tying a shoe this way.
Yes, tying a shoe is a good one. So those are 4 date ideas. Of course, you can add, change, modify, do whatever you want. But we want you guys to have fun, and these opportunities also provide communication opportunities as well. So thank you so much for listening to all of the communication skills. And we really want to challenge you to start implementing them right away. Work on one of these each week and really start to have them become a part of your vocabulary so they become habit. Okay. Thank you so much. We'll see you next month.
Bye.